For more on that, let's bring in Clayton Wimers. He's the U.S. Executive Director of Reporters Without Borders. Such a pleasure to have you with us on the program today. As we just saw in that report, for the first time in history, the main index for press freedom is at its lowest ever score. Just starting with the United States, help us get a grasp of just how much press freedom has slipped under Donald Trump.
Sure, and thank you for having me. It is important to remember that the index is a snapshot in time of the previous year. All the data we collected is from 2024. And so the decline in the United States is really one that's been going on for the better part of a decade. When we first started doing the index in 2002, the United States ranked 17th in the world. It's now down to 57th out of 180 countries. And that is reflected in the fact that all five indicators that we measure have been taking hits year after year, especially the economic indicator due to massive layoffs in the media industry and the closure of newsrooms all across the country, creating a news desert problem. But in recent years, it's really become a political and cultural problem with the massive decline in trust between the public and the media and outright attacks by politicians, in particular President Donald Trump. I should add, though, that everything that's happened in President Trump's second administration for the past 100 or so days has not been counted in the index data. So the decline is continuing before our very eyes, and things are only getting worse.
Now, Trump has so far axed, financial support for state-backed broadcasters like Voice of America, but also for U.S. foreign development aid that assisted media outlets overseas. So how are these outlets confronting these economic pressures?
Well, right now, the media organizations under the umbrella of the U.S. Agency for Global Media are off the air. In the case of Voice of America, which RSF is currently suing the government to save, it's off the air for the first time in 80 years. These are broadcast networks whose mission is to bring trustworthy, reliable journalism to hundreds of millions of people around the world who don't have access to reliable information, millions of people living under authoritarianism. And so taking away these broadcasts is just plunging them further into darkness. And it's opening the door to state-based propaganda and other types of harmful content. The people who are celebrating the demise of Voice of America or Radio Free Europe the loudest are in the Chinese Communist Party. They're in the Kremlin. They're in Tehran. These are folks who are very excited to be able to fill the void left behind by these independent broadcasters who've been shut down by the president.
And taking the example of, NPR and PBS, they're only partly funded by the U.S. taxpayer and, rely heavily on private donations. So where do these private donations then come from? And is the reality that in such a case, media is wholly dependent on private funding?
So the way that public media works in the United States is pretty complicated, and there's a lot of different sources of funding. But the federal dollars that go into public media, for the most part, flow towards the independent local affiliate stations. These are the radio station that you tune into at home, or the local PBS station that you tune into at on your television. Many of whom really rely on these federal grants to help them make their budget. If you take away this federal funding, the effect is going to be the closure of dozens, if not hundreds, of local news outlets. And that's going to have a disastrous effect on the problem I already talked about of news deserts throughout this country. But it's, again, going to rob ordinary citizens of reliable sources of information about their community, about their country, about the world, as well as life-saving emergency programming. In times of crises, public radio stations have proven to be amongst the most reliable sources of information, say during the wildfires in Southern California or the recent floods and hurricanes in the Southeast, especially at a time when disinformation is so rampant online. People can trust that if they turn on their local NPR station, they will get information that helps them stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it goes without saying also that it's an extremely difficult time for independent media, most of all. So what can be said about the future of such media outlets? I mean, is there a viable way to stay afloat and continue fact-based reporting?
Well, that's really the key question that's confronting the media all over the world. It's clear that we need new funding models, particularly in the developing world. The the pullback of U.S. foreign aid has been disastrous for media development in other parts of the world. But it's not just the United States. European governments are also slashing their foreign aid, and some of the programs that get cut first are the media freedom programs. And this is funding for independent media. It's also funding for the infrastructure that undergirds free media. And when you take that away, it's just a boon to authoritarian censorship regimes who are investing more and more resources into pushing out their propaganda, their version of the media. It's really a shame.
It's a shame indeed. Now, Donald Trump's war on the press is, of course, exacerbating the situation, but press freedom has, been on a rather steady decline for the past decade or so, hasn't it?
That's true. And, in 2025, the factor that's leading to that the most is the economic indicator, as you alluded to there. And that's, exactly because some of these problems are really universal, but also because regimes are now getting a little more sophisticated about controlling the press. Whereas, maybe kidnappings and assassinations were the preferred tool of the autocrat, now they're turning more and more to economic pressure as a means of controlling the press. And to be clear, the arrests and the assassinations still happen and are a scourge for the press around the world. But we're seeing more and more use of, say, foreign agent registration laws or bans on international investment in the media, opaque and arbitrary rules about the disbursement of public media funding, all these tricks that make it really hard for the media to sustain themselves and also open the door to corruption so that the ruling elites can reward their preferred media outlets who are willing to parrot their talking points while punishing the ones they consider their enemies.
All right, Clayton Weimers, the Executive Director of Reporters Without Borders. It's great to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.